Yo, what is up, fam? This is Nerps. It's been a long time since I made a video. I'm talking like 14 years, but I'm back. And today, I want to talk about finances and current state of the world. And, as a 28-year-old man, single, it's kind of annoying. Budgeting is not the problem. I don't go to clubs. I barely go out to eat. I buy the generic brands. My truck has 270,000 miles on it. Doesn't have a check engine light, but I have a lot of lights on. It drives great though for how old and how many miles are on it. To be honest, always would recommend 2008 Chevy Silverado. Just a gas hog. Otherwise, I went to the grocery store the other day. Spent like $80. Got like one bag of groceries. I think I got a little bit of meat. Not that much. Probably not enough to last a week. You could if you want to buy chicken and pork, I guess. I do buy that as well, but we're being gaslit into thinking we're bad with money when the reality is that the math doesn't math anymore. The secret to saving money in your 20s is not cutting back on coffee. It's like either moving in with your mom and dad in your childhood bedroom or finding a way to monetize a hobby. Having a side hustle that pays more than your main hustle, your main job. In 1997, you could buy a house, a truck, and raise 2 kids on a decent salary, or at least I assume my parents did. I know they didn't make a lot of money until I was in middle school. They were actually making over $100,000 a year back then, which is probably the equivalent of making $200, $250 now. So my parents were actually pretty set at one point. They were doing good. Dad worked on the road, welding. My mom, she worked, but only made 15 an hour, maybe less. I mean, back in the day, I remember at one point though, they only made 5 to 7 an hour when I was younger. Their house was only $32,000 though, and yeah, it wasn't that big. Kind of not in the greatest neighborhood, but nowadays you really don't even know if you'll ever retire. And here's a controversial take for every guy my age. It's the 9 to 5 is no longer a path to really getting wealthy. I guess it could be. If you have a dual income household, you have solid, you both making solid money. But it's really hard with the current job market. I mean, it's kind of the same as the dating market. It's trying to find a job online has made it a lot harder, and there's a lot more competition, just like anyone sending in a resume. So it's not like the 90s where you really were just competing with who was around you and whoever would send in a resume that knew about the place. Now, it just doesn't quite work. We were raised on save 10% of your income rule. The richest man in Babylon was always set aside 10%. But let's look at 2026 prices. If you make $70,000 a year, which on paper I don't think I technically do. I think I make less than that. I did make though $75K a year or two ago. And after taxes and inflation, It'll take you 15 years just to afford a down payment on a house at 10% a year. So, you're like talking 7,000 times. It's really just, you need 70,000 to get into a house. So it's like you and your wife or significant other. I guess that could be it could work, but it takes a long time. And the safe path is now the riskiest thing you can do. It's like if you aren't done building a secondary income stream or aggressive equity, you're essentially vibrating in place while the cost of living climbs the stairs. Saving isn't a flex anymore. Owning things is. If you're just a line item on someone else's payroll, you're the first thing they'll cut when AI gets an upgrade. Stop trying to save your way to freedom. You have to build your way out. So build, a project, something that's going to make you money. And I don't necessarily think it's like what I'm doing here, talking online. So, what's the problem is like at around our age, you kind of change from being like happy to just have a job and chill with the bros and go do, whatever. But you're like starting to think about like, how do I actually start a family or buy a house? And like, if your girl isn't down with any of that, like not trying to do the like, start a family 9 to 5, like start a business with you kind of shit, it's going to be real hard. You got to have like good business partner, like roommates, like straight up, like you got to be locked in with the team. And it's harder than ever, because it's harder than ever to lock in right now. There's all these distractions. And, at the end of the day, you can't really do much besides waste your time on stuff that's like free. Sitting in the house, going out and doing things isn't very affordable. Going and getting a $9 coffee in the city and then take a $6 round trip train ride is kind of pointless. It just, everywhere you go, costs a bunch of dough. And to be honest, don't get me started on the advice we see on YouTube. Like 21-year-olds in a rented suit, rented cars, rented apartment, rented Airbnb, telling you to invest in yourself and diversify your crypto portfolio. Bro, my portfolio is my checking account with like $900 in it. And I found a $20 bill in my dresser drawer, like under a pair of socks. I don't know when I put there. I don't know how I even put it there. That is my diversification. Like I do have some other things. I have some stocks and some gold. But I bought that when like the economy was good and things were cheap and money was flying in and it was not like stagflating or so it seems. So if today you went and put $100 into the index fund and if the market does a solid 8%, 30 years you'll have enough to buy what? A jet ski? Is how much everything will go up in price. I've seen it in my life, and I hear it from like my dad. It's like at one point in my life I remember getting candy bars 3 for $1. And I'm only 28, and I'm talking like Butterfingers and Reese's and Snicker bars, and they were bigger than what they are today. That was a fire time. That was great. But by the time you're 58, your needs will be shot. And you'll thank yourself that you didn't buy that latte in 2026. We're the first generation of Americans, of like people here that are not going to do better than our parents. It's not crazy to feel like you're behind. Social media and the internet in general makes it a lot easier to compare yourself to others. And comparison is the thief of joy. So don't feel bad. You're not lazy. I mean, if you are, that's a different story. Stop being lazy. Go to the gym. Get a job. Build a business. Start farming. Start doing gardening. Start going outside. Like, honestly, I think getting outside is the biggest key to happiness. Go on a hike. Even if it's snowing out, like, go skiing. Do something. And, that's the problem is I barely have enough money to go ski. I have all the stuff to ski. I have all this, equipment. I've bought it many years ago. And I haven't gained weight because how can you even gain weight in this economy unless you're on like some type of assistance? And even then, I don't think that would get me fat. Like I don't understand it. So, you don't have to blame your coffee habit, and just start questioning why a head of lettuce costs as much as a Netflix subscription does for the month. Because honestly, I get a lot more value out of a Netflix subscription than a head of lettuce. Like, a head of lettuce is just some water. It has really no nutrients in it. And it's kind of, just this has been getting to me. We've been gaslit as Americans, as kids, told to just grind and grind and grind. And to be honest, I've put in like 60-hour weeks since I was 22, like working for myself, working for other people. Doing it for other people is always the worst idea. I'll tell you that. I was putting in 60 hours a week in 2023, 2024 for other companies, and usually it ends in, jobs are not secure, at least in my industry. I think some people have it a little better, but the job industry is not secure, and finding a job is not very easy right now. A lot of people have to accept what they can get, but I think the only thing we can do is just stop playing the game. Don't try to go get an apartment. Don't go try to buy a house, more so. Yeah, if you want to buy an apartment, sure. But it's just like, don't play by the game of the bank. Don't go into debt. If the old path of save, sacrifice, and wait is broken, when something's broken, you gotta fix it. And duct tape ain't gonna fix this one. We're in our prime. If you can't save your way to a house, stop living like a monk just to see your savings get eaten away by 6% inflation. Like, every 10 to 20 years, we see our money basically, it becomes half its value. It's literally, everything has doubled in price by about every 10 to 15, 20 years. Something in that order. I'm not a economist. So, yeah. But the new move is to just, acquire skills. Your bank account isn't exactly the truth anymore. It's kind of a lie because, old people tell you to save and save. But who even knows how you can do that? The only thing you can do is spend your time learning how to actually make money right now. Like AI, a trade. I'm not saying, the trades are cool, but or farming, do something that is a hustle. That's what I'm about. And success doesn't really look like your parents' 3-car garage nowadays. My parents never had that, so I never exactly viewed it in that manner. I always viewed it as a little bit of happiness and having freedom to take off work and go do what you want. When do you want? That was a little yawn right there. I'm just getting up this morning. I just kind of want to talk about this. So I just would not become the guy who goes into 30 years of debt. I've taken on debt already. I had an $80,000 property loan. And, well, actually, no, it wasn't $80,000. It was $30,000. I put $50,000 down. And I was only able to do that because I lived with my mom and dad, and then lived in an apartment that was less than $500 or $1,000 a month. Like, you know, if you're actually making good money, you can do it. You can save money then, especially if you don't have bad habits. Like, you know, don't do drugs. Yeah, smoke some weed if you want. Drink occasionally with the bros, but, you know, keep tabs light. I don't like to go out and waste a bunch of money. There's no point. But I also do like to go out and enjoy myself occasionally. So it's like not every weekend, but do it occasionally with the bros. You do have to have some fun. And the system's rigged. So the moment you stop trying to fit into the 90s version of adulthood as a modern day unk is the moment you actually start living in 2026. Stop checking those prices of eggs and start checking the value of all the hours you're putting in. Because at the end of the day, the only thing they can't take away and inflate is your output and your education. So go learn something. That's really it. Stay broke or stay dangerous. You pick. And, you know, let me know what's your guys' opinions? You know, is the world harder and harder to make it? So leave a like, leave a comment. I appreciate anyone who stayed until the end of the video to listen to me rant and rave about the current situation and finances for an American unk. Deuces, y'all. Take it easy.